This week on Quadriga, Greek deal, new start for Europe. The Eurozone leaders' summit that ended on Monday after a night of tough negotiations paved the way for a new Greek bailout. A Greek exit from the Eurozone seemed to have been averted, but the conditions imposed on Greece harsh, forcing it to relinquish sovereignty in key areas. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said he'd been forced to accept a bad deal. Have the months of bitter wrangling irreparably damaged the Euro project? Or does the crisis offer an opportunity for a reform of the Eurozone? Coming to you from Berlin, Quadriga, the international debate. Your host this week, John Berwick.
And welcome to Quadriga. The EU has already had 2 stabs at solving the Greek crisis, and both have failed. Now, has the Greek crisis become too large to fail? Too large for the EU to simply ignore it? It has to find a solution? Well, maybe. And paradoxically, could that be a new start for Europe? My guest today, first of all, Alan Posener, British-born author and political commentator who writes for the German newspaper Die Welt. And Alan says a new start in Europe would mean scrapping the euro. Unfortunately, Europe's elites, he added, had become addicted to it. Faye Karaviti, Germany correspondent for the Athens news agency and Greece's Alpha TV. She says the Greek case has proven that Europe can achieve compromises, but is not yet mature enough for self-criticism. And our third member on the panel today is the well-known journalist and political writer Ursula Weidenfeld. She describes the EU's management of the euro crisis as muddling along at all costs. First of all, Alan, I'd like to begin with you. Faye here is telling us that this was a compromise. Well, it looked to me like unconditional surrender. What do you think?
Yes, I see that. Definitely it was. I mean, they basically hauled Mr. Tsipras across a log after he'd got a no vote for the last conditions and dictated the conditions to him again, and then he had to say yes. And this has been accompanied, this is the thing that's so worrying, accompanied in Germany with a storm of anti-Greek feeling and patriotic sort of upwelling of feeling, our money thrown into a bottomless pit and so on and so forth. And in the rest of Europe with a lot of anti-German feeling, understandable, but also very dangerous, which is why I think that, as you asked, I think it's created such bad blood in Europe that it's ruined the project already.
Faye, you seem to be more optimistic about it. You at least say that you believe that this shows that a compromise is possible. There have been 2 compromises in the past, though, 2 bailouts that have failed. What makes you think that this is a compromise that might work?
Not much, actually. So this might have been a compromise, at least on paper, but it remains to be seen whether it can actually function. We still need at least 4 weeks of very difficult negotiations to achieve a new program within the ESM. This is not going to be very easy. The German government has actually stated that very clear even today. The debt sustainability is going to be a big issue throughout these 4 weeks. Greek government is demanding haircut. They're not going to get a haircut.
Mr. Tsipras is saying that he doesn't think it will work. He presented it to Parliament and said at the same time, I don't believe this will work.
Yes, which causes, of course, a big problem regarding the program's ownership, as we call it. I mean, if the Greek government itself cannot support this program, it's a very difficult program. It's a very difficult program on the Greek people. If the government itself cannot support it, how do you expect the people to accept it and also the administration to implement it? Because this is also a huge issue in Greece. You can get some laws through parliament, but the implementation is a whole different story.
Yeah. Ursula Weidenfeld calls it muddling through. Isn't that what economists usually do?
Well, probably they do it usually, but this is a quite unusual situation. So it is what we've seen the last weekend was the agreement. We will have a third package, but we don't have one, at least. So they have to negotiate it. They have to have the next upcoming weeks and months to build trust again in what terms, whatever. So it is quite difficult because, as Faye said, it is not only deciding on a program, it is implementing it, it is the doing. And there is, as far as I can see it, no trust at all whether they will do or whether they will deliver.
Well, the ex-Greek finance minister, Varoufakis, who sometimes uses very colourful language, as we know, said he compared it to kicking a can down the road for as long as possible. Would you agree with him?
I think so. I think he's right at this point, at least. So
It's interesting to find you agreeing with the ex-Greek finance minister.
I never thought that would happen.
It was a long night of negotiations, and just at a point where most of us thought that agreement wouldn't be reached, the European Union came out with, well, what some people call a deal.
They finally did it. After a 17-hour negotiating marathon, Eurozone leaders came to an agreement on the Greek debt crisis. Monday's summit results are being celebrated as a victory for Europe. Hammering out a compromise between 19 countries with their conflicting interests certainly wasn't child's play. But the German Chancellor managed to get them all in line. Exhausted but relieved, or at least a little, with the spectre of Brexit banished for the moment and Greece set to stay in the Eurozone, Europe showed that it is capable of action, even in tough times.
Ursula Weidenfeld, muddling through, you were saying, as describing this process of trying to solve the Greek crisis. Is it really muddling through, or is it simply a question of local interests, people fighting for their own local interests? The Germans fighting for the Germans, the Greeks fighting for the Greeks. Isn't that the problem?
I can't see that, because I think that at least Europe tried to stand together to get the problem solved. I'm not so... I don't think that this is the right way to solve it, but
the austerity chancellor, of course, as Alan was saying earlier, had the German media breathing down her neck, saying, don't give in to him, don't give a cent to the Greeks. And she's going to face elections. Even her own coalition partner, who are supposedly politically left of her, were outdoing her in their demands for austerity. Wasn't she also playing a local German political game?
Well, everybody has to play a local game because you need the yes of your parliaments to get the package not only decided, but to get it through the parliament and to things like that. But I think that it is not fair to play the ball to Europe, to the other Euro countries, and to say they have a second agenda and they are playing only for their own population. I think they won't do. If they did do that, they just had voted for Brexit last weekend.
But isn't this a problem, Alan? I come back to it. I'm going to insist on this. Isn't this a problem in Europe, and has been a problem all along, with all kinds of other issues, like the agricultural policy that cannot be reformed, it seems, that there is not a common European vision. There are people who come together, and they come together to get the best deal for their own country out of it. We're seeing it with the British at the moment.
Well, this is fine within the European Union. This is the way European Union works. The problem is the euro.
It doesn't.
Well, but the problem is the euro. If you have a single currency without a single state, without a single debt, without a democratically elected government which is responsible to an electorate about economic policy, then you're going to have the problems that we have now again and again and again, because the euro divides Europe. It makes Germany more competitive vis-à-vis everyone else, basically, in the whole of the Eurozone, but especially Greece, Spain, Portugal, France, and France is going to be a big problem. So you can't have a single currency without some kind of political union, and no one in Europe wants that, least of all the Germans. And this is why this is going to fail. This is why kicking the can down the road means the next crisis is Spain or France. And there we won't be able to talk about Brexit or a Frexit. This is going to be the end of the euro. And people don't seem to be understanding this. But outside the Eurozone, people see this fairly clearly.
Well, isn't this partly, Faye, because European leaders are failing? They're failing in communicating this to their own people and doing it perhaps for their own short-term political aims.
Yes, actually, we've talked about it a lot here as well. The lack of leadership in Europe, everywhere in Europe. Also, the lack of political personnel in Greece as well, is a huge problem for Europe today. Also, in the beginning of the crisis, nobody had any idea about what to do, how to deal with this crisis. And 5 years down the road, we're still struggling with the basics of the crisis. The euro or not the euro. I mean, these issues should have been solved a long time ago.
But only in Greece. The other countries, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, they're quite better off now. So
is it so, though? Is it really so?
It is so, yes, of course.
There's still very high unemployment in Spain,
yes, but
isn't
they have. But
I mean, the banks are doing well in Spain.
Employment traditionally comes after the turnaround of economy. It takes half a year before employment picks up after a recession, like Spain had the years ago. So,
but this is a lost generation. Everybody is saying it's 25% of young people in Spain. In Greece, you've got 50% of young people unemployed. How can this possibly be turned around in a couple of years?
Well, I think if you look at unemployment of young people, you do have lots of reasons for that. That is not only economy, and that is not only the recession or turnaround of economy. That has a lot to do with how do you treat elder people in their jobs? Will they be able to leave the jobs? Won't they be able?
Early retirement.
Yes, not only early retirement, but also the question: would you just, if you are 50 or 55, would you just go for another job? Would you leave your job and to go for another job if there is a good offer? There are lots of countries in Europe where you won't do that because you're not secure that you will be successful. Even there is no opportunity to make people go, and therefore young people won't be able to just come into jobs, to come into a sufficient life, and that is only one of the reasons. But there are lots of reasons why young people do not have the chances they should have.
Alan is itching to disagree with you. I can see he's making...
This is all very well, and no, I don't disagree. Obviously, labour market has to be deregulated to enable people to get in jobs and leave jobs and so on. But just take the bigger view. Look at growth rates in the world. Look at the growth rate in America, in the United States of America. Look at the growth rate in Great Britain. Look at the growth rate in Poland. All countries which don't have the euro have a higher growth rate than the Eurozone has. And the only country with a minimal growth rate within the Eurozone is Germany. And they're very proud of 1.1%, which is terrible. Terrible. So the Eurozone is the problem. And they're not kicking the can down the road, actually. They're kicking the Greeks for their own problems. The fact they've created an uncompetitive zone in the middle of Europe, which is killing itself.
No, they don't. I think you are right. What the perspectives of the euro are. So I'm not sure whether this is a model we will talk about we will talk about it 10 years ahead. But I think, but I think that if it comes to Europe and if it comes to the perspectives of a common economy space or of a common economy, there are lots of chances and opportunities. And you are not better off if you are not a member of the EU. You are better off...
Eurozone.
But even the Eurozone, look at the Baltic states, look at the Netherlands, for example, of Austria. These are success stories. Look at Ireland for years and years and years. At Spain, right now, they have the fastest economy growth within Europe.
But there is, in all these countries, also there is still the problem of unemployment, and youth unemployment remains a huge problem. It does seem to me, Faye, I will ask you about this, it does seem to me that there's a lot of talk about figures and about, from an economic point of view, that actually leaves the human being out of the centre of what economics is about. How concretely do people in Greece actually feel about the situation? I mean, we see pictures quite often that are really quite surprising, because it seems as though life is quite normal in Greece in many ways, the pictures that we see in Germany. But when I read, for example, that the lowest pension in Greece is 300 euros a month, and these pensioners are also supporting sometimes members of the family who are unemployed, that suggests a different picture. What's your sense of the real atmosphere in Greece?
I can give you an example. My father used to take like 700 euros. His pension was 700 euros after 45 years of work in Greece. And this was before the crisis. So the whole picture that has been presented in the international media, that Greeks are lazy people who just sit around and retire at their 50s, and take 2,500 euros a month as a pension, these are not true. And you can also see pictures which are really disturbing these days, and Greeks have the feeling that there is a distinct vengeful element in this new agreement. Exactly. If Europeans do not trust the Greek government or Mr. Tsipras himself, this is a whole different story. But this is the people we're paying now. And the people are going to pay in the next years. But for me, and this is just to pick up on something that Ursula said before, the difference between Greece and these other countries you talked about is that Greece's problem was, Greece is not a poor country, but Greece doesn't have the institutions. We needed institutions. Nobody saw that in the beginning.
It does need reforms, and Greeks themselves accept that, don't they?
Yes, I think we realize that, but nobody addressed that.
There is also a problem of leadership in Greece itself. There's been a problem of leadership, we agree. I have suggested that there is also a problem of leadership in Europe as a whole. I think we are also somewhat agreed about that. You have your reservations.
Well, I thought that at the last weekend we saw that some kind of leadership between Angela Merkel, François Hollande. They didn't agree on each point, but at the end of the night, there were 19 votes within the Eurogroup in favor of a third package and in favor of a reform. And I think this is, in some perspective, an expression of leadership in Europe, which should be respected.
Well, it's a truism in Europe for many people that Europe functions best, or the EU, when Germany and France agree and have the UK as a kind of counterweight. That is certainly not the case at the moment, is it? Germany has really the power in its hands because of its economic superiority, and perhaps that is one of the problems, as some people at least think. Let's look at a report on the leadership question.
The euro has been an economic motor for Germany. It has enabled German goods to be exported cheaply, which has given the German economy a long-awaited boost. For weaker economies, that's become more and more of a problem. Germany's economic strength has made it a dominant force in Europe, upsetting the political equilibrium in the EU. In the Greek crisis negotiations, Germany played the leading role, but Angela Merkel and her finance minister Wolfgang Schäuble are viewed, not only in Greece, but in the US and other European countries, as self-righteous and uncompromising. Is Germany's dominance threatening European unity?
Is Germany's dominance threatening European unity? If you read the French newspapers, you get the impression, don't you, that it was Hollande that saved this marathon session in Brussels, that Wolfgang Schäuble and Angela Merkel were prepared to accept a Grexit. But he was the person who came forward with a European idealism. Europe has to continue on the path that it's on, that we're too far along, there's no way back now. We need not less integration, we need more. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that 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 was not the right answer, or that is not the right answer. I thought the best thing we could say about the last weekend was that everybody went home and was the winner of the game. So Alexis Tsipras went home and said, well, that was the thing I could achieve. Angela Merkel and Wolfgang Schäuble came back, and everybody respected them for just saying at one time, not there is no alternative, but to have an alternative which could be, and which has been discussed. And even François Hollande, who helped the Greek to not only prepare their papers for the summit, but also just to bring it to an end in the night to Monday.
But it seems very uninspiring. It seems, you know, one of the reasons that we're told why Germans like Angela Merkel is because she's such a good manager. But is it Alan Posener, surely in a situation like this, I don't just mean Greece, but the crisis that this actually throws Europe into, and the question about the future of Europe, we don't just need a manager, we need somebody who's charismatic, we need a vision, we need to go forward in Europe, more integration, says Hollande, for example, than less integration.
Well, yes, it's all very well to say we need someone charismatic, but we don't have anyone, so let's face things as they are. I think the problem is not that Mr. Schäuble, for instance, is not idealistic enough. He's very idealistic. He wants an integrated Europe. But he thinks it can only happen if Europe looks like Germany. So he wants all the countries in the Eurozone to be sort of German. And that's the real problem. And he's using the Euro crisis to enforce that. He's trying to make Greece into little Thüringen. And it's not going to work.
No, he doesn't do that.
That's the way he feels.
You can't call for leadership for years and years and years. Everybody wanted Germany to show leadership, not only to pay for everything, but also to shape politics, just to be present on the scene and to show leadership in some kind. And now they're doing it, and it's not right anyway. So what should they do?
Well, it depends on the kind of leadership, doesn't it? I mean, I remember in 2008, I think it was, I was at a party convention, CDU party convention in Stuttgart, where Angela Merkel made her famous analogy of the perfect economist, when she said the answer is, of course, what you should ask the average German housewife who knows that you can't permanently live beyond your means. Isn't that rather an impoverished view of economics, I ask you?
Leadership is not something which you can buy in a retail shop, so you have to take this persons you have on the scene. And if they are not able to deliver something different as you want to be leadership persons, you have to live with what they are able to do and able to deliver.
Faye, 10 years ago, the controversial American economics writer Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book called The European Dream, perhaps you know it, where he compared Europe very favourably with America, with the United States. And he said what we have here in Europe, what he really admired so much, was a sense of citizenship that extols the well-being of the whole person and the community, rather than the dominant individual, as in America. That was 10 years ago. Do you think we've lost that European dream?
Definitely. I don't think people anywhere in Europe, not only in Greece, identify themselves as Europeans anymore. We are going back to renationalizing of Europe, and people are turning against each other now throughout Europe. And this is...
Is this the real crisis?
To me, yes, because combined with the lack of leadership, this can end to where? To what Alan calls it, the end of the Eurozone, at least, if not the EU.
But you are a Greek, I don't need to tell you that the word crisis, of course, comes from a Greek word, and it is the word basically that means to judge, to make a judgment, doesn't it? Exactly. And so that a crisis is always an opportunity, not only for something to fail, but also to make a choice in the right direction. So this is the question we've also been looking at in this show. The question of, is this a new start for Europe? Let me make a quick round of asking you that question again. Starting with you, Ursula Weidenfeld. Is this a chance for Europe for a new start?
Well, that is what Wolfgang Schäuble always says. He always said that Europe only shaped itself in crisis, and that was that Europe always was ready to just find the point, to turn around and to find a turnaround for the better way. And I think in some perspective, I hope he's right.
Alan, are we seeing a game changer here? Is this at least the possibility for Europe of a game change?
Well, if the Europeans would listen not so much to Athens, but to London, for instance, I think it would be. Because what we need...
Then we all become isolationists.
So
we need
why should they listen to them?
We need less integration, not more.
So, very, very quickly, in a couple of words, is it going to work or isn't it? Is Europe going to survive the EU?
Well, it's not a simple yes or no answer. I'm afraid it all depends on
We're unsure,
on us.
but we will see, and we remain hopeful. Goodbye. Watch us again next week.